Member for Peterborough-Kawartha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will let everyone know, Madam Speaker, through you, I will be sharing my time with the member from Battle River Crowfoot today. Thank you and good afternoon, Madam Speaker. As always, it is an honour and a privilege to stand in the House of Commons to represent the constituents of Peterborough-Kawartha. Today, I rise to speak to Bill C-29, an act to provide for the establishment of a National Council for Reconciliation. With Truth and Reconciliation Day just 2 days away, this coming Friday, September 30th, this is an important bill, and I take it very seriously how delicate this conversation is for many people. After 6.5 years, this bill is the government's attempt to address the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action 53 through 56. Now, these 4 calls to action include, number 53, the establishing of a National Council for Reconciliation. Number 54, providing multi-year funding for the National Council for Reconciliation to ensure that it has the financial, human, and technical resources required to conduct its work. Number 55, provide annual reports to show progress on reconciliation. Number 56, the issuance of an annual State of Aboriginal Peoples report to outline the government's plans for advancing reconciliation. Now, as I mentioned, this bill is long overdue, and although we will support a lot of what this bill is, there is serious amendments, serious discussion, and serious overhaul that needs to be considered, and I will address that today in my speech. If we're going to work toward meaningful reconciliation with Indigenous people, a robust and inclusive response to calls to action 53 to 56 is needed. Unfortunately, this bill will not meet the target. We continue to have the same problems over and over, Madam Speaker, and that is there is too much government in the way. You will often hear this saying, and I will be talking about it today in my speech, FIBI, for Indigenous, by Indigenous. We need to trust Indigenous and allow them to do what they are able to do because they know how to make the best decisions for them, not government. Section 8 of the bill has the creation of a not-for-profit corporation that would monitor and report the government's progress in their efforts for reconciliation with Indigenous people. Now, the Council would not be an agent of His Majesty in the right of Canada, nor would it be governed by the Financial Administration Act. It portrays itself to be an independent body. Now, here lies the first major concern we have with the Bill C-29. How independent would this council be if the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations picked the board members? The bill stipulates that the first board of directors would be selected by the minister in collaboration with the transitional committee. This would mean that the minister of the day and their hand-picked transitional team would determine the council's future, which is expected to hold that same minister to account for its own failed record on reconciliation. Now, this doesn't sound like meaningful reconciliation, Madam Speaker. Now, Action 54 calls on the government to provide multi-year funding for the National Council. The government did this in Budget 2019 by allocating $126.5 million, yet the Act would not require any accountability for the expenditure of this money, and not one financial report would need to be filed by the Council. Madam Speaker, this is a major problem. Accountability and transparency are seriously lacking in this government. That is the issue we have at the core here. There is no trust between Indigenous peoples and the government. And the idea that zero accountability and financial reporting on such an important file, it is just more of the same we expect from the Liberals. We need to see where dollars are going so that they are being best used on those who need it most and not on more red tape and a bloated bureaucracy that does nothing to help those across our country who need it most. I see this often, Madam Speaker, in the file of Indigenous tourism, for example. We need to see that the dollars are going directly to the organization that needs the dollars, not through another organization, because then you're going to lose money. It makes no sense, and it's not a good, efficient use of the money where it's targeted to help people who need it most. Now, the most glaring issue with Bill C-29 is the lack of representation on the National Council for Reconciliation. Now, the bill sets aside 3 seats for Assembly of First Nations and hopefully I will do my colleague justice when I say this correctly. Inuit, Taharit, Kanatmi, and Métis National Council. Now, these are the three national organizations the Liberal government almost solely deals with regarding Indigenous issues. Now, this doesn't even scratch the surface regarding who needs to be at the table regarding a National Council for Reconciliation. We need advocates for women and girls, children, Aboriginal business associations, and Native development offices all play an important role in reconciliation and deserve a seat at the table. And what about a voice for urban Indigenous? Just yesterday, I was having a conversation with Jamie Gauncey, a Director of Policy at Ontario Aboriginal Housing Services, about urban Indigenous individuals falling through the cracks when it comes to housing and so many benefits because they do not fit within the bureaucratic boxes when it comes to accessing funding that is an Indigenous person they should have every right to. Someone Indigenous isn't suddenly non-Indigenous when they choose to live off reserve. So why do they lose the support they should have every right to when they have every right to access that support just because they've left the reserve? It's not right. This only perpetuates the goals of colonization that we are collectively trying to undo through truth and reconciliation. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Madam Speaker, if I didn't take this opportunity to mention that this Friday is National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, I would not be doing my justice standing here in this House. This day honors the children who never returned home and survivors of residential schools, as well as their families and communities. The reality is we know now through science and data that trauma lasts 7 generations. 7 generations. The last residential school was in 1997, I believe. That's in my time. My children come home from school and educate me more about what happened in our Canadian history than I was taught in my own school.
So why didn't you hold the voice?
The reality is we cannot have reconciliation without truth, and the truth is just starting to surface. These are challenging but critically essential conversations, and I urge everyone to read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action. Read the report of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples. Read the final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. Every child matters. We will remember the children, their families, and their communities. But it is time to stop talking and just showing solidarity through showing up and starting to have action. And Bill C-29 needs more concrete amendments to ensure that the proper action is taken toward truth and reconciliation. It is long overdue to put a council in place with the right representation at the table. We need a plan, Madam Speaker. We need a plan that is by Indigenous, for Indigenous. Thank you.
Here, here.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, to the member for her intervention today, and I appreciate her encouraging all people to read those 94 calls to action. I'm wondering if she can provide comment on how many of those 94 recommendations the government has acted on, how many actually are the responsibility of the federal government, how many the federal government has acted on, how many are ongoing, and how many are outstanding.
The Honourable Member for Peterborough-Karratha.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the colleague across the way for the question. I think it's really important to focus on what Bill C-29 is here to do, and that's 53 through 56. And this National Council has to be done properly, and it has to have the right representation at the table to ensure it is met and delivered to what it is meant to do, for Indigenous, by Indigenous. And if we don't have the right representation at the table, we will never get our path forward to truth and reconciliation. Thank you.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Edmonton-Griesbach.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'll thank my honourable colleague for their statement of solidarity, especially in relation to September 30th, as many members of this House are aware that's a day where survivors have taken an opportunity in the past to talk about their pains and their traumas, in particular related to the residential school, so I want to thank that member. My question is in relation to a comment the member made related to government being too big. I hope that reference wasn't made in terms of the protections for Indigenous people. As we all know, the right to prior, free, and informed consent of Indigenous nations to any resource project is a critical step and foundation to Indigenous peoples' rights here on this land. Would the member agree that the right to free, prior, and informed consent should stand, especially in the face of resource projects?
The honourable member for Peterborough-Kawartha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for the question. I think, it is really important that we have the advice and consultation that is needed by the people who are responsible. So often when we look at this government, I see it time and time again, decisions are made without consulting the people who are affected by it most. So if we do not have for Indigenous, by Indigenous, that consultation at the table, that representation making those decisions, we will never get a path forward to truth and reconciliation. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Comments? L'honorable député de
The honourable member for Terrebonne. I'd like to have my colleague's opinion, and I thank her for her speech, on the fact that in Quebec we've already had a commission that studied similar issues, and the fact that potentially this committee could overlap what was already done by the commission in Quebec, or if on the contrary my colleague would propose that there be no overlap and that the committee focus on federal issues, especially in Quebec. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Peterborough-Kawartha. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for the question. A little bit cut out on translation. I'm still working on my French, so forgive me. But I think we're open to having this discussion where the amendments are met, where the truth and reconciliation is met. And I think there is nobody in this House that doesn't want a path forward toward this. So I think there is opportunity to have those discussions on what works best, what is most efficient, because I think that's what we've seen from this government time and time again, a lack of efficiency, a lot of talk, and no action. So it is time now to move forward into action and have a plan. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For a brief question, the honourable member for Yorkton-Melville.
Madam Speaker, the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations appointed the interim board, as the member mentioned, the transitional committee, and is now, with Bill C-29, he's responsible to select the directives of the National Council. I am aware that in the Indigenous communities in Saskatchewan, I hear all the time they don't want to be stakeholders, they want to be shareholders, and they want to, in a larger percentage than other Canadians, to be involved in the oil and gas industry. I wonder how she feels about that being something important to truth and reconciliation and their ability to succeed.
The honourable member for Peterborough-Kawartha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my honourable colleague. Great points, and she is bang on. And time again, we hear this. Trust us, we are capable. Give us a seat at the table. We are not stakeholders, we are shareholders. And we want to have autonomy over the decisions that are impacting us. So again, I will repeat it, for Indigenous, by Indigenous, and a seat at the table is needed. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and as always, it is an